Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello again, everyone. John Ray here, your host, North Fulton Business Radio. We are broadcasting from inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. And folks, if you are looking for a better banking experience for your business, and you know what I mean by that, if you're getting big banked, well, here's an idea for you, Renaissance Bank. And Renaissance Bank just happens to be one of the top banks in the country as surveyed by Forbes magazine. So if you're looking for a better client experience for your business, then go to renaissancebank.com and find one of their local offices and give them a call. And I think you'll be glad you did. I can give you a testimony about that myself. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome Tony Kimbrough. Tony is the CEO of the Veterans Empowerment Organization. Tony, welcome.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you having me out today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on. Let's talk about you and how you're serving folks at the Veterans Empowerment Organization.
Thank you. So VEO started in 2008 by a gentleman named Franz Fortune, and started really on just driving the streets of Atlanta and saw two veterans on the side of the road and really had compassion and wanted to really help. And as you remember, in 2008, we had a great recession taking place, and Franz stopped, had a conversation with them, and understood that these guys were veterans, and all they were looking for was work. And like a lot of Americans, they were looking for work. And Franz had a good relationship with Home Depot general manager right up the road, and takes the guys down there and introduces them and say, hey, can you find them some work? And he was able to find them some work and help those guys get started on their journey at that moment. And came back a few weeks later and just said, hey, what's going on with these guys? And he said, hey, they're hardworking, they're awesome, but I don't know if they showered since you dropped them off. And Franz didn't realize that they weren't also just looking for work, but they were looking for housing. And so he put them in their house, and from there, if you can imagine having two gentlemen living in your basement, what your spouse may say, and say, hey, you got to figure this thing out. And so figuring that out was the start of Veterans Empowerment Organization, VEO, back in 2008. And so we have a 2-acre campus on the west side of Atlanta, where we serve veterans in the space of housing, optimal wellness, and workforce development. And so I sit as the CEO. I started there just about a year and a half ago as the CEO of Veterans Empowerment Organization, otherwise known as VEO, and I'm a proud veteran. Served in Afghanistan in 2007, 2008 as a military intelligence officer, embedded into an embedded training team, training police officers, Afghan police officers, and doing a simultaneous intel mission with the Afghan police and training in Afghanistan. And so proud veteran, proud veteran family. And so thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of my background and my experience.
Absolutely. And thank you for your service, and not only to our country, but to your fellow veterans. I mean, thank you for that. And we're going to anxiously hear more on that. Talk about your journey to VEO. You're passionate about your fellow veterans, but talk about your journey when you left the military and how you got to VEO.
Yeah, I definitely can talk about that, but I think the journey actually goes beyond or before, leaving the military.
Let's go there.
It starts with my family.
Okay.
I can't, I'm not sitting here today without, all of them, their background in the military, great-grandfather, grandfather, all served, starting World War I on to where we are today.
Wow.
Where I served in Afghanistan, my aunt served in Iraq simultaneously as we're serving. And so we've been in, our family's been in every major conflict since World War I. And so there's a history of service in my family. And so really that is the start of it. And so I went to a military college, the Citadel, which is in Charleston, South Carolina. And from there, took a reserve commission and drilled and trained and was able to serve in Afghanistan in 2007, 2008. And over there realized, even more what service means and what we mean around the world. I think we sometimes lose that here in America. We do our day to day and we watch the clock and do the things that we do, but you really understand what we mean to the world when we show up on their doorstep. What we mean to the enemy, but also what we mean for those folks that we're serving abroad and bringing democracy and bringing freedom and to countries and to a people. And so being able to bring that back home where we are today, where I'm able to serve in this capacity at VEO is an honor and one that we take very seriously. But through that experience, really learned a lot about what our veterans and what our servicemen and women go through a combat experience. And so what we've been doing for the last 20 years, in Afghanistan and Iraq, what our soldiers have faced, being able to see it firsthand, but also being able to recognize what it looks like. And everybody has a different experience with that. And so being able to bring that to VEO as we walk our daily walk with our veterans to help them on their journey back to sustaining lives.
Talk about what your experience as you were discharged in the military, and then you see your buddies and other comrades that come out, the problems that they face. Talk about those, and that we have no way of understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great statement, great question. Is those problems, and those problems are varying, and that's probably the biggest issue that we see is that depending on their background and their circumstances, where they grew up, varies on what that experience looks like. Are they high school degreed or college educated? Did they have a stable background with their upbringing? And all those things come to play when they step on our doorsteps on their journey to where they've landed. And so let's take an example of a veteran who was discharged after 5 years, didn't do the full 20 years, but after 5 years, grew up in rural America and jumped out of airplanes and beat up their back and their legs. And now they're having to figure out their medical care. And so waiting in line for the VA for, back surgeries or knee surgeries, being prescribed pain medication, and in most cases, opioids. And now we create this cycle where they become addicted to opioids and started this downward trajectory. And then that's where they land on our doorsteps in some cases where, to no fault of their own, they were, prescribed and the snowball effect occurred. And so our job right there is just to meet them where they are, understand, their background and how can we help them, and find that housing, begin to work on the skills they need to be employed again, and then address the crisis, the situation around whether it's mental health or substance use disorder, be able to address that and be able to help them overcome that so they can become productive citizens again and the heroes that we know that they are.
Sure. One thing that strikes me, I would just dare say embarrasses me, is how we as a society look at veterans differently when they're, let's say, bringing out the flag in the middle of the football field, right? And they're in their dress blues or whatever, right? And the jets are flying over, versus that veteran who is on the street, living in a tent, pup tent somewhere, and, asking for a few bucks to get a meal. That we look at those two individuals differently, right?
We do. In my eye, they're both heroes. And it's just their circumstances in which led them to where they're at.
Right.
And sometimes we forget what we did for that soldier. When you look at them in their dress blues and their uniform, they are always that soldier.
Yeah.
They're always that service member. They will always be that, and especially in my eyes. But as you think about military training and we think about what we train our soldiers to do and be, it's the abnormal. Yeah. We train them to be a war fighter, right? We train them how to, in a sense, especially today's battlefield, it wasn't a conventional battlefield, right? Where supply chains were hit. And so somebody who came into the military thinking they're going to run bullets back and forth became infantrymen and women. And so what that looks very different than our previous combat experiences. And so that veteran has experienced war very differently. And so mental health, where back in the day we called it shell shocked or they were weak or these things, we became more educated and we understand what these mental health issues that arise from war combat and multiple deployments. I mean, you have men and women that were deployed 6, 7, 8 times to combat zones. Some of them saw combat, some of them didn't. But just that stress that you put on their family and on them, you cause all of these burdens that you're not really aware of. But where we were thinking as a military is that, hey, we got a warrior that needs to be prepared for combat. We got to train that warrior to react normal to an abnormal situation. We have to prepare them for what's to come on a battlefield. But what we haven't done simultaneously is prepare them for what civilian life is after that. We try to create programs where there's 6 months transition or a year transition where we provide internships. And these are all great things. But the mental aspect of preparing them, that mind for civilian life is different for some of our veterans. And so that's where, when we start to see the difference in the two, we have some that were able to cope with that experience and some that are just not. Prime example, where I still see the military has an issue with this is I have a good friend, one of my best friends, on track to be a general. He was, let's call it top 5%, and he's been top 5% from the time he was a lieutenant until he's now a colonel. Wow. And so, but, on that journey, he, just recently raised his hand and said, hey, after 6 deployments, after my, some marital issues and some things that just, what I've seen, he raised his hand and just said, hey, I'm struggling mentally. Now he's been top 5, top 10%, and he's one of the best colonels that our military has seen, and was on his way to, let's call it, to command the 101st, which is a historical division of the military, and they basically gave him a desk job and said, hey, you're out. Wow. And so he'll be retiring at the end of this year. And so I think that's where we still see these problems existing. And so we just literally stripped this man of his purpose. For the last 20 years, his purpose has been serving in the military. And because you raise your hand and say, hey, I just want a little help here, his performance hadn't lacked. He was still top 10%, but we haven't learned our lesson as a military. And so we continue to perpetuate these problems. And if this individual doesn't have the family background and people wrapping their arms around him, friends picking up the phone and calling him and ensuring that his mental health and his safety is there, which he has, he's hopefully going to, matriculate out of the military and be productive in those things. But not every soldier gets that. And so, where we need to bring awareness to is that family dynamic of friends and being aware of what we don't do well is communicate as veterans, right? We're always okay.
Sure.
We're always right, but
because you got that warrior,
and it hasn't been trained out of us.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be that way, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm always okay.
Right.
I'm always because that's what you trained into me. That's what you made me be.
Yeah.
Which that is my survival mechanism to get through a combat. And 20 years of war, as you can see, we needed that mechanism. And that what makes us the best military in the world when we show up on a battlefield. But turning us to better civilians when we leave has to be the same priority.
Yeah. I get it that the military has needs to improve in terms of its outlook on mental health and how to deal with that. This is a societal issue, though, right? I mean, this is not just a issue with the military. This is how we accept individuals that have a mental health diagnosis.
Yes.
We could talk a lot about that, but
We could.
but let's keep going and talk about how you do your part to address that and the folks that you work with. And as you say, some of this begins with just some basics in terms of giving people housing and training and getting them on the road back to their purpose, right?
Yeah, and what I would say is what I love about VEO and our campus is that when a veteran shows up, it's a veteran-only campus. There's no other civilians. It is, and so when they walk onto that campus, there's a Vietnam-era Jeep. There are memorials to our POWs and to there are flags, and there's a feel of, even in the colors and the makeup of the campus, there's a feel of this military. Even there's a watchtower, and that's it's kind of funny to see that. But there's a military aura about the campus, and so when a veteran comes on, they get that right away, and then everyone who's on the campus is another veteran. And so being able to connect with a veteran in that space allows them to be vulnerable and allows them to open up in due time. Mm-hmm. And we give them that opportunity to open up as we're trying to help a veteran with getting their documents in line, right? Mm-hmm. So whether it's their DD-214 or compensation or any other military benefit or entitlement that they were entitled to while in the military, we work on that. Even wrongful discharge statuses. We help them with that. We'll work with them to get to the right lawyers that can help them overturn discharge statuses. In some cases, that's because of misdiagnosis in the military around mental health, and so we work with them on building that prospect up and also gaining that trust that we're there to support them. And so a lot of our staff and the team members, they're a civilian mix, but there's also military mix. And so our mental health counselors and our licensed professional counselors and the case managers that are working with that veteran begin to build that trust up on that campus. And so that's when we're able to help them move along their journey, find affordable housing, which is tough. I mean, and so we're helping them find permanent affordable housing. We are, getting them on that journey for mental health assessments and working with other veterans and having conversations around their mental health and whether there's medication needed or just other kind of therapies needed to kind of address that. We help them identify what is needed to help them be sustainable, and it's directed, what's needed for them. And then lastly, what's most important here is getting them hired. Yeah. That's why we're on Business Radio, right?
Right.
Get our veterans hired, but also to educate our businesses, right? They need to understand what they're hiring. A lot of times what is presented on a resume is not who they're hiring. They're hiring a leader at every aspect, because that's what the military teaches at every level, not just the colonel who has leadership, that platoon leader who happens to be a sergeant or a sergeant first class has leadership, or they were in charge of 5 or 6. Everybody has to take on leadership levels, and that's what makes our military very strong. And so when you look at a veteran, they have that leadership capability. They have responsibility. They have the ability to show up, do the job, and do the job very well. If we begin to look at them a certain way, and sometimes the job description, hey, what is a rifleman and all these different things, we don't display that correctly. But looking at their leaders, and so, but also being educated around if there's a service connected disability, how they're interacting with the VA. And so I had a case in point. We had an organization, a veteran-owned organization that hires a lot of veterans. And you would think they would understand this from a HR standpoint, but they didn't. They missed the boat on this. And veterans were calling off work and consistently calling off work. No. And they didn't realize that they were having to call off because the VA was like, hey, I can get you in for an appointment. And that veteran didn't know that, hey, if I don't get in for this appointment, then I may not get another appointment for a month or 2 or 3 months. And so they're calling off work to get into this VA appointment. And so this veteran-owned company is saying, hey, I need you here. I need you here. Well, they're having to pick between work or a VA appointment. And so having those conversations with the businesses to understand that they're not calling off for, just any old reason in some cases, is because for them, it is life or death getting into their VA appointment and being that flexible around that. And so educating our business community, not only about hiring, but also just the dynamics that some of our veterans are facing around getting into the VA and getting their benefits and getting these things that could cause disruption within their everyday work lives.
Let's talk, Tony, and folks who are here, let's reset maybe. Folks who are chatting with Tony Kimbrough, and he's the CEO of Veterans Empowerment Organization. Tony, let's talk about just programming. We've talked about housing, we've talked about workforce development and training, retraining. We've talked about both mental health and substance abuse interventions. Talk about any other aspects of that we missed. I guess I want to make sure we get it all because you do a lot.
Around programming, we are a housing first model. And so the ultimate objective is for a veteran to be able to sustain himself and not enter back into a state of homelessness, right? Where they're experiencing homeless again. And so everything to build up that veteran so that they never return. And that's why so we work with financial literacy. And so we have partners like Truist and Cadence and you name them, banks that come in and help facilitate through our partner network. Financial literacy is one big example of how we help with on a program side. We have various therapies that we offer or partner with to provide therapies, and looking at another partnership with hopefully Zoo Atlanta, where we could possibly do some therapies around mental health within our program aspect. And so how to navigate housing, right? How do we go from the journey of a state of homelessness to possibly a renter to home ownership? How do we do that? How do we begin to repair our credit and do these things so that we're on that path to ultimately, we would like to see our veterans get to home ownership and understanding their VA benefits around a veteran VA loan and what that entails. And that's a mega benefit for our veterans. And so all of our program is really designed to provide these wraparound services while getting them to sustainable, independent living on their journey. And so that journey may look totally different for Tony Kimbrough than it does for John, but we're there through case management to identify what that journey looks like and help them push that journey along to success.
Right. So one quick question on your housing. What's your capacity and how many beds or whatever? However you measure that? That's
a great question. And that's one of the things that we have been looking to address. So on our campus, we are in a state of what we're calling a campus revitalization. And so, which we're excited about. We have 4 apartment buildings that we are converting to permanent affordable housing. There will be 2-bedroom units. We just finished our one of the 4. It has 14 efficiency apartments where we'll house female veterans, which we're excited about. And then the other 3 will be 2 bedrooms where we can house veteran families, or we have veterans that like to share apartments. So we'll look at that on a permanent side. So it'll be 54 units that we've created for permanent housing. On our program side, we've kind of restricted down into emergency housing and transitional housing, which will be about 50 beds. And our goal is to transition a veteran through that anywhere between, let's call it 30 days to 90 days. Those beds will turn over and allow for another veteran to come back into the program, or for a veteran to come off the streets into our program. Where a veteran can, hopefully move into either our permanent housing or our permanent housing network that we partner with to get to permanent housing. Our ultimate goal is to truly expand our campus into additional cities where we have a small program center like we've created here, where there's 50 beds, helping veterans get on that journey, but also creating our own network of affordable housing so that veterans can easily get into affordable housing. As you know, Atlanta has a massive shortage of affordable housing. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to maybe 200,000 shortage of affordable housing in Atlanta. So that's who our veterans are in that pipeline of fighting for that same affordable housing as well. And so we want to make a difference and put a dent in that to where we can hopefully create some opportunity in that landscape for veterans.
Absolutely. So as we wind down, I'd be remiss here, Tony, if I didn't get to how businesses can help. Obviously, you're looking for donations. I mean, you're a nonprofit, and folks will give you the website here in just a second, so you can go check out the website and hit that donate button. But beyond that,
I think beyond that is that's a great question, and that's an answer that I love sharing. And so there's ways that businesses connect. For one, let's hire our veterans, right? 2, please come down and volunteer and get to understand what are some of the challenges to hiring a veteran, but also keeping them employed and helping us. And we can help you with those tools. Also volunteer just with resume writing and how to be able to interact in that civilian space, coming from a, very structured and rigorous environment to, hey, a civilian environment, how to, navigate that. And so being able to come down and volunteer in that space, or come down and volunteer, serve food to our veterans, understand some of the issues and the things that got them into the space. And you'll see a variety of people and demographics and that got them in that space, and you become more aware of it and being able to help bring awareness to the space, but also being an advocate in that space for us. And so those are ways, I think, as we become responsible citizens and we think about our veterans, it's becoming aware of the issues our veterans are facing. And I think the best way to say thank you for your service is to understand what their service was all about and the challenges that they continue to face after service, and being able to hold our leadership and political officials and these organizations that support veterans accountable to upholding, hey, we're not going to leave any of you guys behind. Right. You're not going to leave a man or a woman behind on the battlefield. We're not going to leave you behind when you come home and on the front of the home front of the U.S. We're going to be there for you. And that's the best way we can say thank you for your service. Wow. Inspiring. Thank you so much, Tony. This has been awesome. And we're just so grateful for the work you do, and for you and your colleagues that you represent. So thank you for that. It's important work, and we appreciate you. Proud to serve. Yeah, thank you. And but let's get to the most important question, though, which is how people can get in touch that are inspired by what you said and they want to get involved in some way. Yeah, please visit us at VEO Hero. So that's VEOhero.org. You can definitely, like John said, hit that donate button. Recurring gifts monthly is always a way to help us out and help us fulfill the program and the mission that we're trying to accomplish. So VEOhero.org. Also, if you'd like to volunteer, there's a volunteer button where you can navigate to, and we will, be in touch with you to volunteer for various things that you would like to get back and support our veterans. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Tony Kimbrough, folks, the CEO of Veterans Empowerment Organization. Tony, thanks again.
Thank you, John.
Hey, folks, just a quick reminder, if you are looking for a different kind of experience in your corporate team building activity, if you're looking for one that does not involve twisted ankles and broken bones, I've got an idea for you. A&S Culinary Concepts. They're here in the Johns Creek area. They've got a beautiful and award-winning culinary studio. They have a corporate team building activity that's a lot of fun. And you and your team stand around a stainless steel table and season meat and cut up vegetables, and you cook it together and you eat it together. And it's a tremendous experience, and it's memorable. If you want to know more, get in touch with Executive Chef Andrew Traub, 678-336-9196. He'll be glad to tell you more, or go to asculinaryconcepts.com. And folks, North Fulton Business Radio, we're coming up on show number 500, and we are excited about that milestone, and we're going to be celebrating that milestone. But we would love it if you would subscribe to the show, and the way to find the show is North Fulton Business Radio on all your major podcast apps, if you'll use that search term. And if you have heard something here, and I can't imagine you haven't, that makes you want to share the show, please do. We love it when people share the show with each other and help us celebrate the great work of business community leaders like Tony, who are doing great work and deserve to be celebrated and to be found. So for my guest, Tony Kimbrough, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.